Welcome. So this is sort of the launch session of this workshop, and this workshop had, started. It's an extremely broad workshop, and there's a reason for that because, this topic is very broad, HPC and scientific computing, and so to sort of reflect that, we wanted to have a little panel discussion where we wanted to bring in people who are not just from astrophysics. They are from different domains and different expertise. And so we have Professor Manish Jain, who is a faculty here in our department, in the physics department, and he works on, material science problems and, develops codes in that area. Professor Aditya, he's in the Center for Data Sciences. In fact, we'll have an introduction where they'll tell about themselves in a little more detail. But I'll just sort of tell their names. And then we have Mr. Bharatkumar Sharma. He's in NVIDIA, which is a company. And you've heard a lot about GPUs and so on. All that was started by NVIDIA. And of course, I am Prateek. I'm an astrophysicist here, a faculty here in the department. This is Bhargav. Vaidya, he's one of our organizers. He is at IIT Indore. He's also an astrophysicist, just like me. That's Dipanjan Mukherjee. He's from IUCAA, Pune, also an astrophysicist. So with that, we'll actually have a round of introductions where people will tell about, themselves a little better than what I did. Yeah, you can start.
I can start. So my name is Manish, as Prateek already said. I am a condensed matter physicist. So the kinds of problems that we look at is, trying to calculate properties of materials from first principles. Now that may or may not mean a whole lot to you. Although I'm pretty sure everybody has done a CMT one, right? Most of you have already done. So that's phonons, calculating electronic properties, phonons, and those kinds of things. To put it in the perspective of HPC, material science problems are one of the biggest users of HPC throughout the world. One of the biggest. Astrophysicists, one of the biggest. Second expected. So there, typically the problems that we deal with are related to diagonalizing dense matrices. Okay? Large dense matrices. Of the order of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and maybe even millions, right? So, and we use techniques like iterative diagonalization and so on. So, let me just say that, and then if there's any further questions, we can take it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Aditya. I'm a faculty at the Department of Computational and Data Sciences. In terms of physics, my background is on fluid flows, so large-scale simulations of chemically reacting flows relevant to combustion. In terms of methods, right, we develop HPC-centered numerical methods that scale on really large supercomputers. On the way, we are looking at something like using 6,000 GPUs concurrently, right? Or using up to 200,000 processors. So it's a scale of simulations and algorithms that we develop. That's it. Hi, everyone. So I work as a very, I don't know how to call it as, you might find it very weird. It's called a GPU advocate. So I don't mean anything, right? So yeah, because titles don't matter in NVIDIA. So we have a flat structure company where everybody can talk to the CEO. So for us, that's how we work. But so I handle a couple of initiatives. One of them is to work with the researchers to make sure that they use the GPU technology in an efficient manner. So my experience has been on something called as non-functional requirements. So I am basically a computer scientist and a software engineer. I don't come from the mathematical background or the other domains. So that's why my expertise is towards that side, to provide performance-related expertise which can be there for the GPUs with the it may come from AI, computational fluid dynamics, molecular dynamics. It doesn't matter. All of them require parallel computing.
I think we can actually just quickly tell us. I do simulations of astrophysical plasmas and gases. Yeah, we are Bhargav, and we are also a part of the group. So, and then also part used to develop. So that's it.
So I also simulate astrophysical flows. But to a more specific, say, outflows from supermassive black holes, how they affect galaxy evolution, also accretion flows and compact objects, things like.
So yeah, so actually I have 2 mics now, but that's fine. As long as there's no echo.
Fast back to that side, yes.
So, we have actually just made a few points here, and classified these categories. The first one deals with, human resource development. Training the students, opportunities within and outside academia for people who have expertise in HPC. And different flavors of HPC used within and outside academic setup. How to train students to get into this, for example, being in the physics department here, we don't really put a lot of we don't have a lot of formal coursework to get people into this kind of stuff. So, how should students, if they're interested in this area, learn the tools of the trade? Right? And how industry can help in this, and how academia and vice versa. So basically the first point of discussion is training our students. So I think we should express your thoughts on this.
So let me preface this by saying I used to work in a company. So I spent 6 years in 3M. So there I was actually working in the research and development part. Right? So there are 2 kinds of things, at least somebody from industry will probably say much more meaningfully than what I can. But the way I saw it is there are 2 kinds of things that you could do in industry. One is of course R&D, right? And the other is you are not in R&D, but applying in these days, for example, AI and ML kind of techniques or computational data analysis kind of techniques to various problems in industry. In as far as the skill sets that are concerned, from what I understood, when I was working at 3M, they hired me because I was doing some kind of simulations, and that's what they wanted, and so on. Right? But eventually, while I was there, I was doing just about anything that you can think of. Right? I mean, if there was something that required computations, right? 3M is a company that makes Scotch Brite, makes so all kinds of different products. Right? There are people there who need solving problems and of various kinds. For example, I'll give you an example. There was somebody who wanted to solve a problem of if you shine light on a material and it cures during that as you're shining light, how will the birefringence develop at that? Right? If you think about it, right, you have to break it up into 2 parts. Right? There's a ray tracing problem, phase rays, right? It goes there. So you have to figure out whether light goes here, and it's a refractive index, you have to solve a problem of that kind. And then when it goes there, you have to do some kind of reaction. You have to say some reaction happens, and therefore the material changes and the refractive index changes. And then you have to find out the stress as it develops. And then you have to find out how the birefringence happens. Right? I don't know half these things. Right? But the point is, if you sit down and think about it, skills that I had learned during my PhD were about how to put these problems on a computer. Right? Those are absolutely transferable. Right? So the way I see it is that is perhaps the biggest skill that you have to develop if you have to look at industrial application or industrial at least that's my basically.
Right. So Dr. Manish has given a very broad answer. I want to make it more focused on the HPC and programming skill set and what we want to see in future. So I'll go with a small example. A similar kind of workshop was held recently at Hyderabad, giving some lectures. And we have given some hands-on things, right, where in code was given, and they had to put the parallel implementation functions into the code, right? And they took about 1 hour for each of those examples. At the end of 4 hours, right, we were able to, at least 20% or 30% were able to execute the code that shows the results. Now, after all of that, I told them how I generated those codes, right? I just told ChatGPT, right? Generate this point-to-point communication code. Excellent. 30 seconds, I have the answer. Now you are spending about a month or a semester of course to learn similar skill sets, right? And then use it in an hour or two fashion, right? To develop such code. ChatGPT is doing for 30 seconds or general LLMs. So now think about what is needed for future to get a job. Right? That's a valid question to ask. So now you should have the basic understanding of how these algorithms work. That is the first step. Because it's not telling ChatGPT what you really want. You cannot get an answer or the code out of it. So you should be able to, or you should be knowledgeable to understand at the high level things on how these things work. You don't write it hands-on, right? You just ask and it will give you the answer. Now, what you do next is validate what it has done. Right? Try out some small benchmark examples, unit tests, and so on. And then use smaller functions like these put together and build a bigger application. Now, in the context of getting a job, earlier if a company was interested in developing a CFD code or whatever, right? Maybe they are hiring 10 PhDs. Now maybe they are hiring only 2 PhDs. Right? So the number of jobs will also, in my view, shrink. Again, we are in this transition mode. I don't know to what extent this effects will be successful, but this is what I foresee. So, with that interesting perspective, I will give 2 other things. Coming to the question which was asked, with respect to training the students, I think there is, it's called as a triangle. So in the triangle, there is government, there is also the academy and the industry. Unless all 3 of them work together, it's not possible to percolate it anywhere. So industry needs to work with the government, and similarly, the institutions need to work with the industry so that the jobs get created. The curriculum is more aligned towards the industry. So it's like a 3-way path, right? For example, because it was already foreseen that AI is going to touch all of these aspects. India has an AI policy guideline which was created many years back. India was one of the first countries to create a guideline on how to teach. My kid is in 6th standard. She has Python course. By the way, she writes Python, and she has a chapter on AI. Right? So you can think of how things are changing from that perspective. So from a training perspective, all 3 of them are doing their job to do it. Now, whoever is in the transition phase here needs to adapt to those things. So even in industry, it's not just for PhD students. I'm talking from an industry perspective. Everybody is getting reskilled. The word there that is used is reskilled, because there are a lot of changes which are happening in the way this transition is happening. So hence it is very important all of those 3 triangles come together to make sure that the country moves forward.
Actually, taking the point of reskilling, which Bharat has said, I think it is also imperative that people in academia, so like us, faculty members, should also get reskilled in teaching the course and basically imparting the knowledge. The amount of knowledge that is now to be imparted is basically, if it has been done to us, now it has to change. Okay, because everything is available at your fingertips. So training has to be changed in a different manner. And I think also government is coming up with these new education policies, and I think we also have to, the cultivations try to kind of devise courses which can actually have impact on industries, keeping an industry in mind. So I completely agree with Bharat that all this, at least the timers, should actually now work with each other and kind of devise a coursework as far as training is concerned. Now, regarding this, the outside academics, I think it's very important that also we were discussing about these clusters today, and there was a point that we should also look into what these professors know. Additional knowledge than what your physics is, but these skills that you develop, that you learn, is very transferable when you go outside. I want to say, if you let's say you apply to ANSYS or COMSOL or all of these things, they also do simulations, right?
So can you not use your fluid dynamics simulations over there? You can. All your techniques that you would learned there, they would essentially apply. So these kind of things has to be kind of imbibed into the students. And and I think in the school education, it's already been done. So now it's just this phase which you are in. It's a transition phase. So I think you guys have to kind of catch up at both levels to meet the standards in the next few years. And it's changing very fast. I can tell.
Some slightly different views on some of the experts. But by the way, very amazed to see that Python in standard 6. I think I remember doing just logo or basic. But I think ChatGPT is the talk of the town now. But even before ChatGPT, we could get the same things on Stack Overflow, or even before that on numerical recipes. So the question is, why do you spend 5 days on a workshop learning these codes, learning these things? Because as he mentioned, you cannot trust what you get just given to you. You have to have the basic skill set to judge or evaluate what has been given to you is correct or not. You can test it out, but also you need to have the basic understanding of the algorithms. Without that basic platform, you would not be able to, use the tools. And one of the important things that I would like to stress is do not take these languages, something that you're an expert in Python or you're an expert, because Python today will change to something else down the line. As I said, and I learned basic bubble algorithms in basic when I was in school. But those things get replenished. What you should, as a computational person, growing up, is be flexible enough to quickly absorb in trends. But the basic architecture of the computer is not changing much. You have to understand the fundamentals of the hardware, the fundamentals of how a software is talking to the hardware, and always, be flexible enough and quick enough to get yourself updated and not get bogged down into AI things. You have to use these softwares as tools. And you can, as some new version comes up, it's almost like going to the market and getting a better version of the tool. And you have to be flexible enough to quickly grasp and absorb this. And this only comes by practice. As you code more, as I said in one of my examples, you read your newspaper, run a simulation, and then after you finish the newspaper, look at the results. And then 2 years down the line, you do that same thing with a different code. Use this, and then I have no experience with the industry myself, but I've seen many of my friends transition into industry. Friends working astronomy, now working on vaccine technology, now working in geoscience. And as you pointed out, people are going there with zero knowledge about the domain. But the basic skill set is that they are fast in absorbing algorithms, putting them down into a code. Maybe the code structure they're using in that company is completely different. If you learn a basic code, one basic code, C, Fortran, C++, doesn't matter, and one of these interactive codes, any other things you can quickly pick up. So you have to be flexible enough to keep up to date with the standards, both of hardware and software. And I think that will also give you more market value in the industry.
So I think there were quite a lot of different opinions expressed. So I think in the pyramid of industry, academia, and government, the most important thing is missing. Can someone guess what? You yourself. Without that, none of this will happen. Right? Bharat, you would agree with me. Or not? But the energy sector of the that's right. So, it's your job to make yourself proficient at whatever you want to be proficient at. This is internet era. So when we were growing up, when we were in college, just in Malaysia, internet was like very nascent. You didn't have, you don't just type something and find answer to that question. That's the biggest blessing, actually. That's really the thing which has really removed the barriers. So, it's very easy to say, oh, government is not doing this. You would have to spend the time and learn things well. And there are resources out there. There's no need for any workshop, really. I mean, if you just follow
a few things and be disciplined and not give up. You can reach there without any of these things. This is just a push. So you have to you have to apply yourself. Okay, so don't forget that part. So the other, we covered some of the aspects. One of the questions that I see here is how to train students to get into HPC. I think that's something that we haven't talked about much. So maybe we can have a little round of that. So you want to start? You can start here. Yeah. So how to train students. So this is one of that activity. But what's most effective?
I think I'll just keep it short. This is one of these activities that we try to envisage for this. I think HPC in general is a very vast domain, although it's a standard set of codes that you use to distribute your jobs in different ways and accelerate your processes. The applications are quite vast. So we need, in my opinion, two kinds of training methods. One is more generic to cast a wide net to excite people into the world of HPCs and computing in general, and then a more finer net to grasp some of you with more specific inputs about some specific domains. And I think this is something that we have followed on also from the NSM side with Bharat, we've been organizing large-scale workshops and then more focused workshops. Like, for example, Bharat organizes this GPU hackathons. We've been also trying to organize more specific astro-focused workshop, result of this today. And what we need is people from both cross disciplines, not just astro, but also other disciplines, talk to one another. Not just we as faculties, but also the students to learn from each other, and then gain, have a knowledge transfer. I think that is more important because everybody is working in HPC. Some skills and some techniques you're using there will also get transferred here. A mixed workshop with a mixed participation would really help.
Yeah, I think I agree with it, and I'll also keep it really short. I mean, these are the workshops that are essentially to bring you in this. But then there are these advanced versions like hackathons, or you can have like these Google Summer Code programs. You can actually learn, you are more expert, and then you try to basically implement them among different disciplines, have an interdisciplinary, and you start to learn the progress, which is of fundamental nature. This is really going to help me further. For example, the entrepreneurs who are basically coming into startups, essentially sit on a table, take a problem, that interdisciplinary people start coding. Okay, that's how it's basically going to work. So the idea is that there should be like no phase of multi-phase training, but initially this is initial phase that is definitely there. In addition to this, I think we also should, in academia, we should also kind of learn courses which are designed to basically bring them up a pace. I mean, we are lacking in computational courses, at least in some of the universities. And if schools are coming up on this level, and also they should also kind of pump up. So this is training at basic level. But then if you want to mature, I think thoughts and all these things will actually come into place. So that's my take on this.
So I'm just trying to think of an analogy here. So something very weird again, but if I show you the videos of how to cycle, will you be able to cycle? Right? Then I give you a cycle which has those 3 tires, right? As in behind to make sure that the balance is there. Right? So that's like a workshop. Right? The first one is more of like you try to just search something. Second one is this workshop where we are trying to make everything within a controlled environment so that you don't fall. The third one is the most important one where I remove those tires and you actually cycle on your own. That's where the real learning will happen, right? And that's what hackathon is, something like this, where you actually try on your own application. Unless you try it, you'll never learn. You will never fall and you will never learn. So that's what I would say would be the right approach, which is a 3-tier approach, and all 3 are required. I don't send my kid directly to fall, right? I will first give some support, and that's what should be. Let me take a totally different perspective here. So let's come from the hardware side. At HPC, you can do HPC on your phone, right? Which are the edge devices. And you can go all the way up to HPC on the supercomputers, which has several GPUs, CPUs, and FPGAs. Right now, first you want to understand which kind of hardware scale that you want to target and be an expert in, right? Or maybe you are expert in translating codes across different scales in the hardware, right? First, you want to identify what is your role in terms of the hardware, and then learn the skill set that is necessary to translate or optimize codes or think about efficiency and so on for that particular hardware skill. Yeah. So again, resources are there, but you just need to first think deeper on how you want to position yourself in this training, right? Where you fit in.
So, I mean, I completely agree with what has been said so far. So, here in IISc, we actually offer a course called Computational Physics. Right? I can see some of the students who've taken this course here. You know what the first homework assignment is? Learn Python. 10 days later, there are 18 problems that are given to you. Submit. Right? The point is, you, as Bharat pointed out and has been said by others, you cannot learn programming unless you program. There's no other way, right? Is it easy? Probably not. If you've never programmed before, it's going to be you're going to curse the instructor. But that's the only way to learn. There's no other way to learn it, right? I don't think the way you learn changes as you go more advanced. I don't think anything changes. Right? That is just my belief. Others can disagree. I think it remains the same. The idea is it's computers. What is the cost of trying? It's nothing. It's just your time, right? Right? And a lot of hair if you're like me. What on earth? Why does this not work? Right? You have to try it, and that's how you learn. Right? That's how you figure out whether this is going to work or not. Right? But I think going back to what Aditya was saying, this is also a very important point. HPC means very different things to different people. Right? There are people who will say HPC and who will not talk about anything but a supercomputer. Right? But the device that you have in front of you is actually capable of a whole lot, right? And you can actually learn a lot of basic stuff on that device, and then, as he said, you can actually translate up the chain and go to other things and actually figure out how does that work over there. Why does this not work over there, right? The ideas are the same. I have to parallelize, meaning I have 10 cores, I have to run this, but 10 cores sitting here, 10 cores sitting there. Now what do I do, right? So the idea is that you really have to try this stuff. There's no other way around, right? If you ask me what we do a project in the course, right? Homework assignments are very good by and large for you to learn because there's an answer. Right? There's an answer. There's a correct way. There's a wrong way. You get an answer. It's right or wrong. Right? By and large, in your research, you're not going to know. Right? You hope it is right. You hope there are no bugs, right? But there might be. Just hope that they're not too important. Right? So the thing is, you have to learn how to evaluate the code, how to look at this, how to figure out that this is giving you the correct answer. In this limit, does it work? Does it work over here or not? I think it is any different from what you learn when you do physics, right? Let me ask you a question. When you do physics, what do you do? How do you learn something? You start with a simple example. Right? If you understand that, then you go on to something a bit more complicated. Okay, now let's add this, right? It's not different. It's not really much more different than that. You start with something, you look at this limit. Does it work? Yeah, it works. Okay, I know that this part, I know that if I go in this limit, these are the parts of the code I'm touching. These are probably okay. Right? Now let's check this. So at some level, training in this is no different than training in physics. You guys are all trained to do all of this, right? It is just that you may have to learn a different language, which is the language in which you put it, how you make the computer understand this. I don't think it's that difficult, but it does require effort. It's not going to come, without effort, it's not. So at the end of the day, we can talk about training, or as you said, talk about riding a bike as much as you want, right? And if you do balance it this way, it's going to all work out fine, right? And when you're doing it, that's when the true test comes. And there's more, the cost is very low, right? You all have a computer in front of you. You can just figure this out.
Like a sophisticated experiment.
Yeah.
You are carrying a very fancy. You say don't try too much. Yeah, whatever you do, your computer catch fire.
Yes.
Right? So there's no penalty for trying things. So the thing is, be adventurous, try things out, adopt like the latest things that people use for software development. Talk to people. You have to know. Networking is extremely important. You cannot learn everything on your own, but or know everything on your own. But you have to know. Okay, if I have this question, who is the person who I should talk to? So that I can make progress. So that's another aspect. Right? You should know. You should have enough connections, at least directly or indirectly, to people who can help you out in various situations.
Just wanted to add one thing to it. So, again, from an industry perspective, I'm seeing there's a large gap in terms of how the codes are written in academia versus industry. Uh, Fundamentals of how to use versioning system like Git is missing. Like when you write codes, do you by default start using versioning system? Maybe not, right? And then it goes from one PhD student to the other PhD student. There is no documentation. So 1 year is gone in actually figuring out how the whole PhD student actually made it work, right? So one of the aspects of it is also to include these basic fundamental things into so that it becomes more of relevant and it will increase the productivity of everyone. And I'm telling this from a global experience because I conduct these hackathons worldwide. And I'm seeing some countries doing it like it's mandated, you have to use it. While I don't see it so much prevalent in particularly in academia in India, where all of these things on documentation is very important. How do you name your very simple things, right? Like I cannot have IJK, right? It doesn't mean anything because you're making the life of the other PhD student more hard. That's one thing which should be definitely added.
But that's a very small point, right? When I asked ChatGPT to write, it gave along with the documentation.
So by the way, we actually had a session in the morning on GitHub and why and how we should do this. In my group, for example, I asked them whatever, take the figures that they have in their papers should be available as GitHub code that someone can run and produce those figures. Okay. So it will not, I don't think it's necessary for publishing that paper, but it builds, this good habit. And habits is what create system. Right? Without habits, you can do 100x today, tomorrow you do 1x, and then we all love regularity. Our brain is just hardwired for that. So it's good to get into good habits. So it's a little effort, but it's worth it in the long run. Okay, so I think we have covered this. And by the way, this course on computational physics that Manish is talking about, it's an extremely popular course here. And it's not that old. Actually, Manish sort of started it himself. He sort of also contributed a little bit. And we have about 25 to 30 students taking this course.
And 40 students.
And it's 40. So it's a course to teach because there are projects and homework, evaluations, and so on. So I would actually suggest all the 2 days workshops can accomplish this stuff that you learn from a proper semester course. I would actually sort of suggest you guys and IUCAA and all the universities to have this in their syllabus. Okay, so I think we have covered the first point of training. Now the second sort of set of points here, let me just read out. Role of AI, ML in HPC and vice versa. So how can AI, ML affect HPC and how can HPC affect AI, ML? And part of it, Aditya already mentioned, right? But, so that's one. So the second on this is journey to exascale. What's the path forward? And how should software be developed for hybrid logic? It's basically the same question. Okay, so AI, ML, and exascale is the next thing. So maybe we can start with that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think AI and ML is a domain, as in at a higher level, like computational fluid dynamics or whatever it is, and it uses HPC, right? So HPC is the foundation over which all of this will work. So it's not comparison according to me, but it is more of AI and ML uses HPC. But the usage pattern is very different. What do I mean by that is the communication pattern in AI ML is very different from, say, computational fluid dynamics or molecular dynamics. It's primarily data driven. So it behaves in a slightly different manner. For example, AI ML also uses 8-bit precision, right? While HPC has traditionally been using 64-bit and sometimes even going till 32-bit. So you need a different kind of a computation behind. So it will use HPC, but a different type of HPC, and that's why nowadays when you are seeing the processors have different types of cores inside, meant for doing 64-bit, 16-bit, 8-bit, and there are other different various combinations of IEEE, which are P float 16, 20, and all of those things coming to the picture, right? So that would be my say. So everybody will do it. One fundamental difference, though, I see in AI ML is that most of the part of analyzing is already taken care by the frameworks because they have been standardized. If you're using PyTorch, if you're using all of those libraries, they by default have incorporated all of this scaling and all of those algorithms so that it can go across thousands of GPUs, so that the application developer never has to know the beneath the scene thing. While in case of traditional HPC, like if you're writing your own codes, whenever you write your own algorithms, you'll have to know how to make it parallel was one of the points which was brought out by Aditya. Like if you're writing your own algorithm, then you need to know this. But if you're going to use frameworks like PyTorch and all, we never teach them CUDA or GPU computing for AI developers because they don't need it. It's already taken care behind the scene for you. That would be the difference.
So I totally agree with Bharat. So let's talk about exascale, right? Exascale machine, right? It does 10 power 18 floating point operations per second. Now, do you know how much amount of energy does it take to power an exascale machine? It takes about 30 megawatts. You know what 30 megawatts is? It can decently provide the power for a grid-sized town, right? You can light up entire town and its energy needs with this powering supercomputer. Now imagine that you have written a code very poorly and it doesn't scale. You are depriving power for so many people, right? You really want power cuts in their homes, all right? So you really need to make your codes very efficient. Okay. One of the things is how ML and AI can play a role in accelerating this simulation or making them. I'll give you one example. So we do reacting flows, right? There are chemical kinetics. In astrophysics, as Prateek was mentioning, we have plasma kinetics. So something like A plus B gives C plus D, right? So A, right, when it consumes, the reaction consumes A, B is also consumed. So there is a strong correlation between the consumption of A and B, and then the appearance of C and D. So instead of solving for 4 PDEs for these concentrations, maybe I can just solve R gives B, reactant C products. So I'm now only solving only 2 PDEs, correct? But these are virtual linear combinations of A and B. And how is that mapping happening? This is where you can use ML to augment these error corrections that these reduced manifolds provide. Okay, so now you can do simulations much more efficiently. You can earlier, if you were just doing a simulation of a rocket engine, just a flame, now maybe you can do the entire boost with these kind of AI accelerated algorithms. So that's the role of AI that I see towards HPC. Similarly, when you have large volumes of data in AI, obviously you cannot fit it on a single GPU machine, right? Now the data is distributed. This is where HPC comes into picture. And as Bharat was pointing out, PyTorch or other TensorFlow frameworks, we take care of how to move data across different processors. So that is the role of HPC in doing it.
So I know very little about AI, but I can tell you this: if I were in your position at this time, starting my PhD, maybe about most of you are first, second year of their PhDs. third year,
or even younger.
or even younger.
Masters in maths.
First year.
First year, I would learn AI. Right. The point is, it's here to stay, right? Whether it is directly applicable in your research as of right now, that depends on the problem that you pick, whether it is, large, whether it involves large data or not, right? But I don't think AI ML as a tool in anything is going away anytime soon, right? It is developing. The kinds of things that are coming out of it are really extraordinary. It is not going away. Even if you cannot see a direct application of these tools in your research, I would still learn it as a tool for data science. Because believe me, in your careers, at least that is, I think it is here to stay. Maybe I am very naive, but I do believe that in your careers, you are certainly going to use it. Not as a user of ChatGPT, right? That you're probably using as of right now. But even, as people who do computations for a living, I'm pretty sure you will be using this in your lifetimes as a tool to actually do analysis of various kinds. It is in its nascent stages. Maybe some of the promises of being overpromised, some of it will not work out. Some of the things that they're saying will work out and will not. But it is a tool which is here to stay. Right? And in general, there is a lot to be learned by using these tools. So my basic this thing about it, and as far as HPC is concerned, there are actually some very interesting things that have come out. And, for example, as Bharat was mentioning about PyTorch and Aditya was also saying the same thing. There are people who are actually beginning to say, these are by the way written in Python, right? These are codes written in Python. The people who are saying that, these are basic, what does AI ML use? Does anybody know what do they use on the backs? Neural networks, that's right. But what do they do? I mean, what kind of mathematics do they use? It's linear algebra, right? What do you guys use for your computations? Linear algebra, right? Large amount of it is linear algebra. People are beginning to use these tools. For example, they have structures that they have built for PyTorch and TensorFlow and so on. People are saying, look, these guys already know how to parallelize these large matrices. Why not write my problem, which requires linear algebra, on top of this? I will use their framework, and this framework is already parallelized, and I'll be able to use this thousands of GPUs at the same time, right? Except for the part that he also mentioned, these guys don't care about precision, right? They actually want to make it faster. So they might actually say, 32-bit, have you ever done anything with real stuff? I guess have you done anything with floating precision? Anything? So you learned about what precision does it use?
In fact, if you want to restart the Pluto code, you have to use double. It cannot use Pluto.
It's not useful. Point is, there are some things that they don't care about that you care about a lot. Right? Now there are people who are asking the question, and it's a legitimate question to ask. We keep saying, we have to use double precision, right? It's very important that calculations won't work if you want to, we get wrong answers, right? Is that really true? And it's a legitimate question. When we teach it, we actually say that, okay, look, this is true that you should always use float, and the default in Python is double. Default in Python is 64-bit, right? Representation of a real number. But there are opportunities here, even as what has been developed in this community, for you to actually to see whether you can actually even do the problems that you are doing faster by using the techniques that they have actually developed for. There's a large effort that has been put into this. Right? For example, they have written, you all know NumPy arrays. You all know Python, right? You all know NumPy arrays. They have very nice libraries written for NumPy.